Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the 10th day of March 2024, and I have a couple of readings, actually 3 readings for you. First is from the letter of James in the New Testament. Second chapter, James says this: "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill,' and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead." Here's Matthew from early on in the Sermon on the Mount, right after the Beatitudes. "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." And my third reading is from Facebook. This is a meme from Facebook, so obviously it's short. "Your beliefs don't make you a better person. Your behavior does." The Sermon on the Mount is a summary of the best teachings of Jesus. It's an early document thought to predate the Gospel of Matthew, which is written somewhere between 70 and 80 AD, although some argue that Matthew was earlier than that. The Sermon on the Mount was put together by the early church when the eyewitnesses began to die off, and there needed to be some authoritative collection of what Jesus had taught to pass on to the new generation of followers of the Way. Matthew picks up the Sermon on the Mount document and incorporates it into his gospel, along with big chunks of the earlier Gospel of Mark that was also on his desk, and another written document that modern scholars now call Q, for the German word Quelle, which means source. The Sermon on the Mount is part of one strand of earliest Christianity. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus had relatively little to say about what he wants his followers to believe. It's all about what he wants his followers, how he wants his followers to behave. The other Christian strand is later. The Apostles' Creed is one of a series of creeds or statements of belief that emerged beginning approximately 170 to 180 AD. Church leaders first, and later the emperor of the Roman Empire, called the church leaders together to respond to various ideas that emerged within early Christianity. 3 of these early ideas that gained traction in the first few centuries of Christianity were, first, the concept of the Trinity. Here's the question: was Jesus subordinate to or consubstantial with God the Father? Anything less than consubstantial with God the Father was deemed by the church leaders as heresy. The second idea that emerged was a debate about whether Jesus was human or divine. The bishops got together and decided the answer was yes. Jesus was fully God and fully human. Anything less than that was heresy, so deal with it. That's what the church leaders said. The third idea was something called Gnosticism, with a silent G at the beginning. Gnosticism, a belief that there was a secret knowledge or saving knowledge that would grant its holder a free pass into God's new kingdom. This was declared a heresy, but it has been difficult to stamp out. As recently as 100 years ago, there was a hymn that said, "This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasure is laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I won't feel at home in this world anymore." The bishops said that was heresy, and they would have agreed more with Robert Frost, who wrote, "Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better." So the bishops and the leaders of the church would have agreed with Robert Frost rather than with that Gnostic hymn. One of the earliest discussions of the Trinity, that is, discussions about what we should believe, was around 170 AD. 4 or 5 generations after the Sermon on the Mount document about how to behave was circulated in the Christian movement. The concern about the Trinity, a word that is not used in the New Testament, led to an early version of what we now know as the Apostles' Creed. This early creed was required of believers at the time, but it really didn't end the debate on the issue. 150 years later, the Nicene Creed reasserted that all Christians should believe in the Trinity. Anything less was heresy. Now, in the meantime, Christians were a persecuted minority. Church properties were seized by the state, and Christians were arrested, they were jailed, they were slaughtered in gladiatorial entertainments for the masses. The persecutions were periodic. They would come and go over time. One persecution, the Emperor Nero blamed the Christians for a fire that consumed much of Rome in 64 AD. And in the ensuing persecution, both Peter and Paul likely died in Rome. A century later, another emperor, whose name was Diocletian, oversaw perhaps the worst persecution of the Christians. But on the night of October 27th, 312 AD, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge for control of the city of Rome, Constantine had a vision of a cross. He instructed the next morning, after he'd had this vision, the next morning on the 28th, he instructed his 40,000 soldiers to paint this cross, which he had had a vision of, on their shields. And they went on to win the battle, and Constantine became one of 2 imperial leaders of the Roman Empire. Eventually, he became the sole leader. Within a year after the Milvian Bridge battle, the Edict of Milan ended religious persecution throughout the Roman Empire. And before the death of Constantine, Christianity was on the way to becoming the established religion of the Roman Empire, instead of a persecuted religious minority. Suddenly, the church had a new ally. When there were riots among dock workers in Alexandria over the question of whether Jesus was human or divine, the emperor stepped in to call the bishops together to develop a statement of proper belief, a creedal statement. And then the emperor enforced conformity in religious belief through the power of the state. Heretics, those who didn't agree with the creeds of the church, were excommunicated, and then, on top of that, they were banished by the emperor from Roman territory, or they suffered a worse fate. I find it interesting that the earliest Christians felt it was more important to teach new Christians how Jesus would want them to behave than to develop a creed to teach them what to believe. One of the best statements of belief that I find in the four Gospels is at the end of the Gospel of John. The end of the Gospel of John is not the 21st chapter, it's the 20th chapter. And someone later on, after the 20th chapter had been written with a nice conclusion to it, somebody came along and wrote the 21st chapter and added it on to the Gospel of John. But in the original ending, the Gospel writer at the end of chapter 20 says this, and I think it's a great statement of belief. Now Jesus, he says, did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these signs are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. I like that. Now, God bless. Around here, the pandemic's over, but it's not over. We're still getting COVID cases. We have 3 COVID tests ready to go here at the house in case either one of us is feeling poorly. But in any case, take care of yourself. If you find value in this, I'd appreciate it if you'd pass it along. Thank you. God bless. See you soon.